The Mesilla Valley has a long storied history of agriculture, and one of those staples is pecans. The stories being told here are about the families whose history are deeply rooted in the Borderland region and help to make Stahmann Farms one of the top producers of pecans in the state, the country, and at one time, the world. Stahmann Farms dates back to the early 1900s, and we're with the fourth generation of Stahmann farmers.
My great-grandfather came down the Mississippi with my great-grandmother and my grandfather and his sister, and they ended up all the way down in the state of Mississippi, and they then proceeded to come out west, and they ended up settling in Tornillo. They bought a farm there, and they grew cotton, they grew cantaloupe, they grew tomatoes, and so they decided to come up further north to New Mexico because the quality of the water was much better up here. It wasn't as salty as the water down in Texas and Tornillo and Fabens. So they bought land to plant their cotton. And one day a farmer could not take delivery of his pecan trees that he had bought, and so my grandfather paid for them and he decided to plant them. It ended up being that they really thrived here in the valley, and so they decided to give it a shot. He planted about, I would say, around 200,000 trees on about 4,000 acres in 7 years, from 1932 to 1939. My great-grandfather and grandfather purchased this land in 1925. My great-grandfather died 1929, so my grandfather, Dean Stahmann, took over everything and started working with his cotton, and then in 1932 he started planting the pecan trees. So the Bracero program was very useful to my family because it allowed us to bring workers up here to actually develop the farm. And my grandfather was also very involved in helping them get their residency here, to establish residency and get their permanent residence, because we'd guarantee them a job. All this area was the Santo Tomás de Iturbide. It was a Spanish land grant. This was really remote in the 1930s. So when my grandfather started planning out this farm, he divided it up into about 8 different ranches. So each family would have their own house, and then sometimes the wives would go work too, go and work in the sorting plant or in the field with picking cotton. The way it worked is that they ended up settling here and having children here, and the children would grow up and a lot of them would stay here and work. At one point, I think I had 4th generation employee here that had grown up. His great-grandfather and grandfather and father worked here.
There's now a group that meets every 3 to 6 months of people who were born and grew up on Stahmann Farms and continue to tell of the traditions and the stories of where they grew up and what they remember most fondly about growing up on Stahmann Farms.
Every time I talk to people about it, I tell them Stahmann's is a big farm. And Stahmann had about at least 8, maybe 10 little ranches inside the big farm. And each ranch used to have about 50 families. Each family used to have about at least 5 kids. So it was like a commune. It was big. You know, everybody was happy. The houses were all in a row. Everybody used to be neighbors next door. Start with Rincón, Ojito, Plaza, Esperanza, Lomas, La Fe, Cristo, Cristo Viejo, Palmilla, Snow Ranch, which Snow Ranch is considered Norte.
So when we would gather at school, we would say, "Where do you live?" "Oh, I live in El Cristo." "And where do you live?" "Esperanza." And that's how we knew. We were all Stahmann kids, but we all lived in different parts of the ranch. It was a lot of acreage.
I was actually one of the few people, I think, that remain, that was actually born there. Dr. Jenkins would come and make home deliveries. So I was born in the ranch named Palmilla.
Some of the other traditions that I really enjoyed, and it was really just farm living. We could go out and explore. We had nature out there. We had the acequias there, where everything from crawdads to frogs to whatever. So even as little children, we were studying science firsthand, and We were capturing tadpoles, and it was just very, very nice living. We were Mexicans from all parts of Mexico, and yet we were Stahmann Farm kids. We felt like a community. It didn't matter that you came from Chihuahua, you came from Torreon, you came from Tamaulipas, wherever you came from Mexico, we all became one Hispanic family at the farm. And that's what I remember best of it. We were all poor kids, but because we were on the same boat, none of us knew we were poor. We just grew up with each other. And that's why we like to get together now, because of those memories, because we were family. We formed a family there.
I did grow up here, and I grew up on Snow Ranch, and so some of the fondest memories that I have are getting together with all the kids at that ranch, at that community, because we had tons of kids there. So I always had a lot of friends. I always had people to play with and kids to play with, and they were not very far from my house. They were just walking distance.
80% of the kids went to Gadsden School District, and 20 of us went to Las Cruces because the dividing line for the district was there. Nowadays it's all Las Cruces, but before it was Gadsden. So we had that. So let's say that I wanted to have a girlfriend. I probably had a girlfriend in Gadsden, and I probably had one in Las Cruces too. So for me it was an advantage somehow, but it was nice.
Just a wonderful group of people. We were blessed. I feel very blessed to have been born and raised there.
We had a beautiful childhood, very sheltered, very natural. There was nothing compared to what children are going through nowadays. And everything was natural. I mean, we learned to swim in the river. We didn't have a swimming pool. And everybody was united. Everybody was very much a big family. In other words, if you were visiting one of your friends in the next house and it was dinner time, it was dinner time for you too. Another chair was added and another tortilla, whatever it was a meal, beans or whatever was shared with everybody. So that's the kind of memories that I recall.
There was a lot of back roads, so I remember learning to drive a car. I never had to go on the paved roads. We would learn in the back roads, and always a lot of fun going on. And it offered, the whole farm was like our backyard. So I remember growing up, going out, and the rule was, if you could eat it, you could get it. You can't take it to sell or whatever, but if you can eat it, you can eat it for free. So we would go out there and go all day, and sometimes we'd be cracking pecans just to keep going and playing and so forth.
There always used to be a baseball team, and there's a place going up towards the airport where they made a baseball field. And the road would go up, but in between there was a big open area, and they used to call it La Taza or La Copa. And that's where we used to play ball all the time. And we used to play football, and the trees were out of bounds, and believe me, they don't move. We used to play against each other, right? Other different teams, different ranches. Like one ranch would play the other. And it was awesome because, we have that going on for all throughout football season. Basketball came around, we used to play against the other ranches on basketball also. So yeah, we kept ourselves pretty much involved in that too.
Music was a form of entertainment, and it was something to keep us busy and out of trouble. And we did we did music for most of the parties at Stahmann Farms. We played at the Riverside Hall. We came to El Paso too. And we had a band called the Innovations. At that time, Stahmann Farms and Sunland Park were having some issues. And then to top it off, we had a wedding to go to play at Sunland Park, and we were scared because they're gonna beat us up, But our drummer, who was my brother then, didn't show up, and another guitar player. But when we got to Sunland Park, we knew that we were gonna get beaten. We said, well, how can we resolve this? And said, let's get a drummer from the audience. And it was a drummer from Sunland Park, and we made it okay. So Carlos Castillos, I remember him.
My parents brought me there to Stahmann's when I was a year old. I was there till 18 years that I had to leave to go to school actually in Albuquerque. But my father worked for Mr. Stahmann for 36 years. It's awesome because my dad started as picking pecans, irrigating. My dad had no education. He never went to school. And at the end, when my dad retired from Stahmann's, my dad was in charge. He was a main man for refrigeration. He was in charge of the electricians, in charge of the welders, in charge of the metal workers. He was a big foreman there for Mr. Stahmann.
At the time, there was drought and there was no work. And so the Bracero program was occurring here in the United States. And my dad heard about it. And so he came over to Ciudad Juarez, and then he was processed in Socorro. The farmers would come from everywhere and say, who knows how to drive a tractor? Who knows how to do this? And they would gather and say, oh, I do, I do. And so, but they also talked among each other, and so they would say, no, don't go to East Texas because there's a lot of prejudice against Hispanics, or go over here to the Mesilla Valley. And that's how Dad got to come to the Mesilla Valley, but he was alone. He left my mother and my oldest brother back in Tlahualilo, Torreon area. So because he was a tractor driver, they worked him during the farming season where they had to work 24/7 to get the land ready for planting. So they liked his work, and the rancher, which was Snow Ranch at that time, said, we want to keep you, we want to bring your family. So they got the ranch lawyer to fix the papers, and that's how my mother and my brother were able to come and join my father. But she said it was a whole different culture. It was just a whole different place. We didn't have to pay rent or electricity, but the pay was lower for the workers because we were living there.
My dad was a farm worker for many years, but he also developed a trade as a mechanic and also as a developer. There was a station wagon abandoned, and he took the top off the station wagon and put it on the truck. And to my knowledge, it almost seems like that was the camper, you know. Because when we went to El Paso, there was 3 or 4 cars following my dad on the truck. I said, where did you get that? He said, I built it.
My dad, although he only went to school through the 6th grade, always highly, highly encouraged education. So he himself, and I remember at the time thinking, I'm so proud of him because he decided to go to ESL classes. And he learned English. And he learned enough English that he was able to become the head plumber at Stahmann. He went to Mr. Stahmann, actually flew him in his airplane so he could take his test. And he didn't pass it the first time, but he wasn't discouraged. They went back again. He passed his certification for plumbing. So then he became head plumber at Stahmann Farms.
They were blacksmiths, so which is an art, you know, and my father started working all kinds of types of blacksmithing, you know, blacksmith shop and welding and making tools. He was a tool maker. He was all kinds of creative, artistic, ornamental fencing and all that. So he knew all those arts. In fact, my mother used to gripe at him because everything that got broken, he would repair it with iron or some kind of metal and everything. And my mother once told him, "Ay, Alfredo, one of these days when my bones or something break, you're gonna replace me with a metal, some kind of metal and everything welded to me and everything." So that's the way my father was. You know? He was a welder, but he was welding mechanical parts all the time, fixing them up and everything. Especially in Stahmann Farms, when they needed to repair the equipment for picking up the pecans and all that. He was there to repair all that. In fact, some of the tools and machines that were used in the farm were made by my father and Tamis co-workers. They were invented there. He loved his work, and we were there for about 20 years probably.
And my dad started irrigating cotton fields. They had a lot of cotton. They had geese that they would release the geese and they would go and clean the cotton. I remember seeing that.
He would sell the geese and would sell the goose feathers for the pillows and then the meat to sell it.
So in the 1950s, my grandfather decided to buy 500,000 geese so that they could weed the cotton. They didn't have to have the men with hoes weeding the cotton. And so it worked for a while, but then the webbed feet of the geese started compacting the soil, and it didn't allow the water to percolate through. We had to stop being in the goose business, and so then from there he got into the chicken business. He wanted to fertilize naturally, And so he got into the chicken business, so we would have a lot of manure to be able to fertilize the pecan trees. We used to have a commissary here, a store, that was a mercantile store actually, and it used to sell everything. We had a butcher shop, we had a fruit section, they sold tires, material like fabric to make dresses, clothes, things like that. They had a gasoline station together with the store, and so all of the employees could come and charge their groceries to their account and charge that they could get gas too and charge the gas, and everything was sold to them at cost. I didn't know that until just recently. My first job was to work at the store. I was 9 years old, and so I kept bugging my father that I wanted to work and I want to work. So he took me to the store and just dropped me off one morning like at 7:30. Just dropped me off. The first thing I did was go in and push on the cash register. I pushed $1 million in there and rang it up. And the manager was very nervous about that, but it all turned out okay.
You wanted to learn something, they would start you in the fields, and you get up to where, for example, me, I started in the fields, I ended up working with the electricians, which was awesome because I learned a lot. I learned carpentry, I learned electricity, I worked in the store, I worked pumping gas, it was awesome. It's a beautiful place to work, and every time I pass by there, it's good memories come by, man.
What I remember most was that there was always work on the farm, either harvesting pecans, picking cotton, hoeing the cotton fields, all types of work. I did all that, and then for my final job on the farm, I worked a couple of years at the country store that they had, and that was considered more like a blue-collar job, a step up from working in the fields. In those days, a gallon of regular gasoline was 27 cents and 32 cents for the premium gasoline, which they called ethyl at the time.
Another fun fact is I actually worked at the Stahmann store. Randy Stahmann is the youngest of the kids, and Randy was considered wild, and he would do his own thing, whereas the other three, I think, were maybe raised a little more responsibly, I don't know. But Randy was a baby, so Randy would go with all his friends, and he would tell him, yeah, you can get that, yeah, you can get whatever you want. And then what I would do is I would jot it all down. I would charge it to his dad. How brazen of me, huh? Anyway, I did. And then the manager would say, he said, well, yeah, if you think, yeah, let's go ahead and turn it in. And I would tell him, well, won't it be a loss to you when you do, end of the year accounting? And then he would say, you're right. So Randy, little did he know that we did jot down everything. Yeah, but Randy's passed away, so yeah, he wouldn't be mad at me.
I know he would report at times the report he made every year at the payroll time. People would stand there and he would report, this year we made a $3 million profit. Yeah, it sounds like a little bit, for the comparison to that nowadays. But in those days, $3 million was a lot of money. And we would judge the fact that, well, how much is that coming back to us? Yeah, it came back to us in the pension and the retirement and all that he had for us. So he was very much a humane person.
That man really appreciated his people. He loved those people because those people made him.
Everybody got a little bit of a bonus, but it was because, like Mr. Stahmann said, if you will take care that nobody steals from us, because this is for all of us. So if people are taking from me, we won't have enough for me to share. And so it worked. It worked.
And that man created a good thing. They had profit sharing. Up to right now, my mom is still living off of that profit sharing with my dad invested in stocks, and she's still surviving on that.
My dad, he just wanted to work and wanted to live so badly. He would make himself go to work, and finally one of the supervisors there at the office complex talked to my dad and said, you know, you're not doing well. Why don't you just concentrate on taking care of yourself? Well, Mr. Stahmann, Bill Jr., found out about it, and what he did is he ended up, because they had cut my dad's salary in half. Well, Mr. Stahmann, when he heard this, he retroactive paid him all of the money that, you know, who else would have done that?
And Mr. Stahmann was always very open to the public. He was very human. He had a lot of people skills and a lot of humanity, and of course passed it on to his sons and his grandkids.
He was fluent in Spanish, which is another thing that showed his consideration for the people that worked for him. He learned their language and their customs and traditions and supported them.
I can remember as young as 4 years old, going up to the airport. Stahmann had a private airport. We called it La Mesa. It was a big mesa, and he would open it up to the workers.
We had community events like the Matachines and the festivity days for the Independence Day of Mexico and the Cinco de Mayo celebration and Dia de los Muertos, and all those were community related.
For Christmas, he would have a truck. They'd go to every single house in Stahmann's, and they would knock on the door and ask how many kids there was in the house. And every kid would get a bag of candy and an orange and an apple and that, but every year. And he would do that for all the kids.
And it was just a lot of things that we had at the farm that Stahmann Farms would provide, medical needs for the people working there. We didn't have to go to Las Cruces or El Paso for our medical needs. He had a physician close to the area that we could go, and also even a priest was also brought in so we could attend church.
My mom says that she will say that she lived the happiest days of her life ever, that she wishes she could go back. And it makes me sad because she can't.
We had the monkeys, we used to call them, the lightweight fellas that would get up on the trees all the way up to the top, connect a rope to a tractor, and they would shake every leaf, every branch and everything, and all the pecans would come down. Nowadays, they have the one big machine that hooks up the stem of the tree and shakes it all. That's it, they don't worry about it.
And then we would clear out all the trees and the twigs and everything, and we pick the pecans, and then they would pay us by, you know, the weight. But then they came up with like a vacuum cleaner that picked the twigs and the leaves and the pecans all at the same time. And so slowly through time, they didn't need as many workers as before.
One of our core values is continual improvement, and so we're always looking out to see how we can improve our processes, our farming, our shelling, our sorting processes all the time. The current acreage of this farm is 3,300 acres. We used to be the largest pecan grower in the world, but there's some bigger plantings now. I think that we probably are the largest in New Mexico. Pecans are super healthy. They have the highest amount of antioxidants than any other nut, and they're delicious. You can put them in anything. You can put them on salads, you can make pecan butter out of them, you can put them in breads, you can crust chicken with it. They're just super versatile.
It all depends on the year. This year was a good year, and we ran about 12 million pounds through the plant. But even then, I think we could probably double that. The future plans are to continue making our farming practices more sustainable, and to focus on having healthy soils and conserving our water. We're putting in a 100-acre sprinkler project this year with help from NRCS. We're expanding our farm in Lordsburg, planting 1,400 acres of pecans and pistachios. And a variety of crops is also a big change that's coming. Of course, everyone is concerned with what the future holds and what the climate may look like in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, how much water there's going to be. You know, with a little bit of time and with help from local, state, and federal governments, farming's going to do fine here. We ship pecans to Asia, to Canada, to Europe, Middle East, all over the place.
This is what we do. It's in our blood. It's ingrained, and so it's a beautiful life. That's why the quality of life is great here.